Lakuta Sichas Chelek Chav Beis, Parshas Tzav Sicha Beis, Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef Ben Yamin Ben Reb Menashe Kaltman. This is an absolutely fascinating Sicha. The topic, the Minchas Chavitin, seems like a more halachic topic. What's fascinating about the Sicha is that the Rebbe shows us how all the puzzle pieces fit in together so perfectly. There's two opinions, there's Rashi, there's Rambam, there's a halachic relevance. And as you go through the Sicha and the pieces fit in so beautifully, it is truly a geschmack to learn. Let us begin. In Heitige Seder wird erzählt wegen dem Din von Chavite Kohen Gadol. This Parshas Tzav talks about the Din of the Chavite Kohen Gadol. Chavite Kohen Gadol is a mincha, carbon mincha that was brought by the Kohen Gadol. As jeden Tag, Tomid, the Pasuk says Tomid, so we learn from this that it has to be every day. Darf der Kohen Gadol bringen, mi beise, mi mamoine, the Kohen Gadol would bring from his own money a carbon mincha. It was an isaroin, which was prepared. It was prepared in a frying pan. It was prepared in an oven. And then it was separated into machatzisa ba'boker, machatzisa ba'erev. Half was brought in the morning with the tamid shel shachar, and half was brought in the afternoon. What would happen if the Kohen Gadol passed away and they have not yet appointed a substitute, a replacement? So right now there's no Kohen Gadol who is responsible to bring the minchas chavitin of the Kohen Gadol. There's a machlokes tanoim mishal mi ha'sakreva, the minchas Kohen Gadol, from whose money, from whose possession would the minchas Kohen Gadol be brought in this interim period between the passing of the former Kohen Gadol before the appointment of a new Kohen Gadol. Reb Shimon sagt das mishal tzibur. Reb Shimon holds that it comes from the communal coffers, from the lishka that would pay money for the karbanis. When Rabbi Yehuda haltas mishal yershim, Rabbi Yehuda holds it comes from the heirs. The yershim from Kohen Gadol bringen the carbon mincha. Is memana and under Kohen Gadol, the yershim, the heirs of the Kohen Gadol, are obligated to bring this minchas chavitin every day until they appoint a new Kohen Gadol. Then he would bring the minchas chavitin from his own possession. Now, what is the reasoning? What is the explanation for these two opinions? In Gemara, the Gemara brings on this a braise that explains the reason. Rabbi Yehuda darshin tem pasik. Rabbi Yehuda looks at the pasik, v'hakoyin hamashiach tachtov mibanav yasa oisai. That the pasuk says the kohen which will be anointed in his place from amongst his children will bring or make this minchas chavitin. Now the literal meaning of this pasuk is talking about the next kohen gadol. That the next kohen gadol would bring a minchas chavitin after he is anointed and appointed. But Rabbi Yehuda learns in the pasuk as follows: the hachi masman, it could be understood as follows: hakohen hamashiach, the anointed kohen kishemes, when he passes away, tachtav mi echad mi banov, in his place one of his children yasai, so will bring the minchas chavitin. That after he dies, before the new kohen gadol is appointed, echad mi banov will bring it. His children will bring it in his place. And from this, Rabbi Yehuda learns that the yarshim, the heirs, have an obligation to bring the minchas chavitin for their father. When Rabbi Shimon learned that from pasuk chukas olam, Rabbi Shimon learns from the words chukas olam, which literally, as we're going to see later in the Sicha, means that it has to be brought for forever. It's chavitin is something that is done every single day, and even after the time of Aaron HaKohen, and so on. And nevertheless, Rabbi Shimon learns another limud from this, Mishal Olam, that it came from the Olam, from the community. Mishal Tzibur, Trumas Betrumas Alishka, that the money came from the community, from the communal coffers. So we have a machlokes, who is responsible for the mincha after minchas chavitin after the Kohen Gadol passes away. Rabbi Shimon says the tzibur, and he learns it from chukas olam. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's the yarshim, and he learns it from tachtov echad mibanov, that the children have to bring it in his place. From the Lashna Mishnah, mishal mi ha'sakreva. Now, from the words, from whom was it brought? It doesn't say who's obligated to bring it. It says from whose money is it being brought. And as you look at the wording of each of the Tanoim in the word in their opinion, is mashmas der chiyuv ha'akrava midayraisa and leiminu achar tachtov is nit abazunder under chiyuv. It implies that this obligation to bring the minchas chavitin after the Kohen Gadol passed away is not its own separate obligation, different, separate from that which the Kohen Gadol would bring when he was alive. Das heißt, as the Torah hat mechadish given noch a chiyuv, hakravas chavitin v'meis Kohen Gadol, the Torah is introducing another obligation, the fact that somebody has to bring the chavitin after the Kohen Gadol's passing. Nor, das ist a hemshech und in demselben Sug chiyuv ha'akrava, wie der Kohen Gadol allein is a makriv. It's the same obligation. It's just he can't do it because he's not alive, so somebody has to do it for him. But it's not like there's a separate chiyuv. Chiyuv number one, the Kohen Gadol brings it. Chiyuv number two, someone else brings it when the Kohen Gadol is not alive. It seems that the implication of the wording is that the obligation is on the Kohen Gadol. That obligation continues beyond his lifetime, and the question only is who's paying for it. Now, if that's the case, that this interim period is the same chiyuv as while the Kohen Gadol was alive, we can learn as the plukte in drashos aksuvim is verbunden mit a plukte in teichen akarben v'chavitei Kohen Gadol. That this argument, how to learn the psukim, whether the psukim imply that the tzibur brings it, or pays for it, or that the yarshim, the ears, pay for it, will be understood based on understanding what is the characteristic of this carbon. We have to understand what is it when the Kohen Gadol brings it. Once we understand when the Kohen Gadol brings it, we'll understand why there is a difference of opinion after the Kohen Gadol passes away, being that it's still the same obligation. Sif Beis. And Beis the Rebbe is going to bring in a discussion which is going to lead to the understanding of the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Is this considered a carbon yachid, a personal carbon, or is it considered a carbon sibur? The Rebbe is going to suggest explanations for both sides, but just so we understand. On the one hand, this is being brought like a carbon tamid; it's being brought every single day. On the other hand, it's coming from the Kohen Gadol's private money. So, is it considered a carbon sibur or is it a carbon yachid? And let us see how the Rebbe explains this debate. When I get them together from Chavitei Kohen Gadol, with regards to the characteristic, to the definition rather of the Chavitei Kohen Gadol, despite the fact that on the one hand they are coming from the account of the Kohen Gadol, und das heißt seiner carbon, and it's considered his carbon, und Chavitei Kohen Gadol, as Chazal call it, the Chavitim of the Kohen Gadol, Kem and Claren, we could still analyze. Is it considered entirely a personal carbon? Others, carbon sibur, or do they have some similarities to being considered a communal sacrifice? Yeshleimar, das ist verbunden mit Taimei carbon. We could explain that it would depend on what is the reason why, what is the significance of the carbon chavitin. The chinuch is masbir. On the one hand, we find the Sefer HaChinuch says like this: Mishorshei mitzvah, from the root of the mitzvah. The Kohen Gadol is the emissary, the agent between the Yidden and the Eibishter, their father, our Father in heaven. He's the one who carries their prayer upwards. Ba'adam, in their stead. And through the tefillos, through the prayers of the Kohen Gadol, and through the karbanos that he brings, this brings atonement to the Jewish people. And therefore, it is appropriate for this person that he should have his own unique carbon on a regular basis, like the carbon tamid that was brought for the tzibur every day. And this will be beneficial for the Kohen Gadol and for the people. So in other words, he's bringing it as a representative, or as part of his position as a representative of the people. So according to this explanation, it would be implied as minchas hachavitin tamid von Kohen Gadol, that it's like a carbon tamid of the Kohen Gadol. is b'shvil kaparas hatzibur, it's for the atonement of the people. Al derech v'tmidi hatzibur is similar to the karbanas tamid. Ubefrat as mizmakri v'chavite kohen gadol zusammen mit dem karban tamid, especially since they were brought together at the same time, implying that it's a carbon. At least it has some similarities to a carbon sibur. So if you look at the reason of the chinuch, the implication is that the chavite kohen gadol could carry the definition of at least ke'ain, similar to a carbon sibur. Aber mashmo moving as kama v'kama learning, as a carbon is verbunden blaze bit kohen gadol atzmi al yachid. But there are others that obviously learn that this carbon is more connected to the kohen gadol as an individual, and therefore it's considered a carbon yachid, a personal carbon. As it can be understood from some of the other reasons that are brought in those commentators that explain the reasons of the mitzvahs. L'dugma, for example, the Rabbi bring kama v'kama. The Rabbi brings a number of reasons for the chavite kohen gadol, umehem, and amongst them, one, to enter before Hashem with humility, ubisimoni dalus, and signs of poverty, ka'ani ve'evin anitzal of den kol others, like a pauper standing before the master of the universe. So therefore he brings a chavitin, which was a very simple sacrifice, to inculcate humility into the kohen gadol. So again, it's about his own presentation. Or another explanation, another example that Rabbi brings. Hashem, I wanted that every day there should be both communal sacrifices and personal sacrifices. Derech klal v'derech prat, something from the community, something from an individual. So therefore, again, this is the carbon yachid. So we see in these two reasons that there is reason to say that the carbon minchas chavite kohen gadol is a carbon yachid and not a carbon sibur. Now, based on the fact that you have two legitimate approaches, one to say that it's like a carbon sibur, and the other to say that it's like a carbon yachid, now we can understand the machlekes. In the case of the kohen gadol that passed away, and there hasn't yet been a new kohen gadol appointed, and we said that the machlekes in the Rabbi says that it comes from the tzibur, from the yachid, from the yarshim, and Rabbi Shimon says it comes from the tzibur. Now it fits. Carbon from kohen gadol is a carbon sibur. If you follow the approach that the carbon of the kohen gadol is like a carbon sibur, and then that would lead us to say, as when they're talking kohen gadol to bring them carbon. If there's no kohen gadol to bring the carbon, therefore gebrach werden from the tzibur atzmai, it has to be brought from the tzibur, from the communal coffers. But if you're going to say that it's not connected to the tzibur, to the community, no, it's representing the kohen gadol as an individual. And in that case, if the kohen gadol passed away, their carbon gebrach from the yarshim. Then the carbon comes from the yarshim, because since it's an individual private person, then when he can't do what he has to do, his heirs take on that responsibility. So the Rebbe gave us a very beautiful, beautiful explanation to understand the machlekes. Not only do they have different sukkim, he learns it from Echad Niban of Tachtav, and he learns it from Chukas Olam, but it makes sense what they're saying. According to Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's a carbon yachid, and therefore he holds that the Yarshim carry the obligation after the passing of their father or of their inheritor. Whereas the Rabbi Shimon holds that it's a carbon tzibur, and therefore if the kohen gadol is not here, the tzibur takes on the obligation of the chavite kohen gadol. So far, so beautiful. In Siv Gimel, the Rebbe is going to fit this idea into the opinion of the Rambam. We're going to say some extra words on the Rambam, and the Rebbe is going to explain the Rambam based on one of these opinions, including the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says Yarshim instead of Banim. Banim would mean sons exclusively. Yarshim means any heirs, including daughters, including brothers, etc. And we're going to explain that as well. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the carbon is being brought, the chavite kohen gadol is being brought from the yarshim, from the ears. The farvas, the carbon is verbunden mit kohen gadol asmi, because it is something that is connected with the kohen gadol as an individual. This will now explain, help us understand the words of the Rambam. The Rambam says, Mes kohen gadol b'shachris. If the kohen gadol dies in the morning, after he already brought the morning half of the isarin of the chavitim, and they have not yet appointed another kohen gadol, Meviim hayarshim isarin shalem avur kaparosei. The Yarshim bring a holy isarin, which is something we didn't talk about yet, but because we spoke about on a daily basis. But here it's talking about they passed the middle of the day. So in the afternoon they would bring an entire isarin. They wouldn't bring a half isarin. But then the next two words are what we're going to focus on. The Rambam says avur kaparosei, that the Yarshim are bringing it for the atonement of the Kohen Gadol. Move on. What is the significance of these added two words of the Yarshim are bringing this for his atonement? And what is the source? Where is the Rambam's source that the reason that the Yarshim are bringing this, the Minchas Chavitin, is for the kapara, for the atonement of the Kohen Gadol? No, der beer in them. Der mit will der Rambam andeuten auf den Tam, for was is der Din as Mavin Yarshim. When the Rambam says avur kaparosei, the Rambam is giving us the reason why the Yarshim are the ones that have to bring this carbon. The inyan noisif bazeh, and there's another thing that the Rambam is explaining to us. The lecheira von dem was Rabbi Yehuda is mishana von lashon pasuk mi bonov yasa oisa unzog Yarshim. The fact that it changes where the pasuk says mi bonov and Rabbi Yehuda says the word Yarshim. Is verstandig. It's clearly Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that it's not exclusively the male sons that have to bring this carbon, this chavitin. It could be any of the Yarshim. Now, just to explain why it makes a difference, the Rebbe adds in the parentheses, when you're talking about the sons, the sons belong. The minchas chavitin is their thing. For two reasons. It could be that one of these sons is the one who's going to be his successor. So now he already potentially is the Kohen Gadol, and subsequently he is going to actually be the Kohen Gadol. So therefore, he's going to be bringing the Minchas Chavitin on a daily basis when he takes that position. Then afilu banav stam, even the other children, those who are not going to become a Kohen Gadol, they are Koyanim and will remain regular Koyanim, not the Kohen Gadol. In addition to the fact that the Kohen Gadol would bring a Chavitin every single day, also every single Kohen on the one day, the first day, the day that he is inducted into the service, would bring a Minchas Chavitin. So every single Kohen brought a Minchas Chavitin. So it would make sense to say that the sons of the Kohen Gadol, because they've brought it once before, or they might be bringing it every day at some point in their life, so it makes sense that they should step in their father's place. But to say that, let's say, the daughters could bring it, what connection do daughters have with the Minchas Chavitin? But from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says Yarshim instead of Banim, it's implied that even if the Kohen Gadol doesn't have male sons, and his heirs are daughters, they would be obligated in the Minchas Chavitin because it falls upon the Yarshim. That even these heirs, not the sons, that even daughters would bring the carbon Minchas Chavitin, and how does Rabbi Yehuda include daughters which are not in the pasuk? So the Rambam is coming to clarify two things. Number one, why do the Yarshim bring this Minchas Chavitin in place of their father? And why are all the Yarshim included when the pasuk says Banov? Varefet does the Rambam. And the Rambam answers, their carbon is nit fun un als the Yarshim mitzadatzmam. The carbon isn't coming from the Yarshim, as if the Yarshim are bringing their own carbon. Nor avur kaparosoi. The Yarshim are doing something for their father for his atonement. Das was the Yarshim bringing them carbon is lieb the kapara from the Meirish. They're bringing it as an atonement for the inheritor. As it is explained in Chazal that the purpose of the Chavite Kohen Gadol was for the atonement of the Kohen Gadol. So now the children are bringing it for him. It says nita gather from Zeir carbon, so it doesn't go into the category of being their carbon, nor a carbon from dem moirish. It's a carbon that really is coming from the inheritor. They bring in also Yarshim them carbon shalavim. They are bringing their father's carbon as his heirs. In other words, if they were bringing their own carbon, the question would be why should they bring it? And the question would be, And the other question will be why the daughters, not the sons? Daughters can't bring a carbon, at least not the minchas chavitin. So, but the Rambam, when he adds the words avur kaparosai, he's saying since they are stepping in for their father, they are just an extension of their father. Therefore, if their father was obligated to bring it, they are obligated to bring it, and that's why this is following the shita of Rabbi Yehuda that the carbon is a carbon yachid, and since it's a carbon yachid, Therefore, the children step in the place of their father as his extension, and therefore it can pass on to his yarshim, even those who are not banim scharim, male sons. So this makes the Rama very geschmack. In other words, before we were learning the Sikha, he says avur kaparasei, you don't know exactly what's the Rama trying to say. But now that you understand there's a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Shimon, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that it comes from the Yarshim. Why? Because it's a carbon yachid. So now we understand that Rambam is saying even more than that. He's saying avur kaparasei, that not only is a carbon yachid, but the children are stepping in as an extension of their father, and therefore they could bring his carbon yachid, and even his daughters could bring it as well. In Sif Dalid, the Rebbe is going to bring a Rashi, and the Rashi on these psukim in our parsha. And the Rebbe is going to be, it's like a miniature Rashi Sikha in the middle, which the Rebbe is going to ask a few questions on Rashi. The Rebbe is going to answer the questions based on the understanding of this machlokes that we have until this point, that the ones who say that Mishal Tzibur is because they hold it's a carbon Tzibur, and the ones who say Yarshim is because they hold it is a carbon Yachid. So let's learn the Rashi now. Siv Dalet. According to this explanation, as is in together from ein carbon tzibur, we can sagen dass a carbon yachid kein gadol. That on the one hand they are like a carbon tzibur, a communal sacrifice, and at the same time they are also like a personal sacrifice. But euch werden verstandig the Pirush Rashi from pasuk. This will also explain to us. This will also explain to us the Rashi on this pasuk, where it says that the Kohen HaMashiach, the Kohen who is anointed in his place from amongst his sons, will bring this carbon, and the pasuk ends with the words Kalil Toktar. It is fully burned on the mizbeach. Now, Rashi is Matik Deveter HaMashiach Tachtov Mibanov. Rashi quotes the words from the pasuk, the Kohen HaMashiach Tachtov, who will be anointed in his place. And he's Mefarish and explains, HaMashiach Mibanov Tachtov. He who is anointed from his sons in his place. Which basically means he says the same words as the pasuk, just in a different order. He shuffles the words. When the Rachas Amaiti Deveter Kalil Toktar, then he quotes the words Kalil Toktar from the pasuk, which means they will be fully burned on the Mizbeach. And his Mefarish and Rashi explains, Ein nikmetzes, that there's no kmitza here. Liyesh Yareh Nechalin, so that the shirayim, the leftovers, that would the nikmetzes means the handful that was taken from a carbon mincha. A handful would be taken and be burned on the mizbeach. In this case, Rashi is saying that you don't do kmitza. You don't take off a handful and then leave the rest to be eaten. Elakula kalil, the entire mincha is burned in the mizbeach. So now, is an ersten Dibur nicht verstanden. The first Rashi is not understood. Wie Mefarshim seine Medaik, as the Mefarshim and Rashi point out, was will Rashi befirushe, welche besteht in Hepech Seder HaTevis HaPasik. What's Rashi trying to tell us? All he does is he shuffles the words. Was der mit wird nicht tana oder nicht tesen, wenn it's a pasuk. What by this moving around the order becomes changed or increased in the understanding of the pasuk. Euch in zweiten Dibur is schwer. Then in the second Dibur Maschil, was ist der Rashi mechadish? What is the chiddush? What is Rashi telling us? Pashtus from Kalil Toktar, if you simply translate the words Kalil, fully, like Kol, everything, Toktar, is burned on the Mizbeach, hat nur ein Upteich, as wir das in ganzen Maktel gaben Beach. It only has one way to explain it. That it's entirely burned on the Mizbeach. As bleibt Gorish Lachil, nothing remains to be eaten. So what's Rashi telling us? Nochmer additionally, Rasha Alein Hatchen Frier gesagt im Loschen Einli Ela Minchas Yisrael Shinik Metzes. Minchas Koyin Shei Kalil Chulu. Rashi earlier says, I know that a mincha of a non-Koyin has kmitza. How about a Minchas Koyin? Und is about it Moisef Bir, Rashi doesn't explain what Kalil means. Heißt es, as man versteht the Pashtus, was Kalil meant. That Rashi expects you already previously to understand what Kalil means. As man verbrennt dem ganzen carbon, that the whole carbon is being burned. Hein was darf Rashi dumm mevarer sein, mit der ganze Arichis einig metzes liyesher and chol kulu. What does Rashi have to explain? That it means that there's no kmitza and that the rest is eaten. Rather, everything is burned on the mizbeach. We already know what kalul means. Rashi already knows that we know what kalil means because Rashi used kalil and didn't say anything. Weiter, the question has a third layer. After pasuk shlach is in the next pasuk. That if it's a minchas koyin, which is the mincha that the koyin brings on the day of his chinuch, on the day of his being inducted into the service. Rashi mefaresh the word kalil. Rashi then here all of a sudden Rashi touches the word kalil and says everything is equal, that it goes up to heaven. The last two times Rashi used the word kalil without saying anything. Then he explains that there's no kmitza, but everything is burnt. In other words, the previous Rashi didn't touch the word kalil. He explained what's happening. There's no kmitza, the whole thing goes. Here, all of a sudden, he's saying, why are you using the word kalil? Because kula shava, everything is equal. So the third point is, why? First of all, the question is, what is Rashi telling us? What do we not know? Kalil takta means it's all burnt. The second question is, why does Rashi elaborate? If previously Rashi already used the word kalil and didn't explain it. And the third part of the question is, why all of a sudden, after all that, does Rashi now touch the word kalil? Not just he's explaining it like he did in the previous Rashi, here he's touching. Kalil means kula shava. So these are the questions we have in Rashi. Number one, what is Rashi telling us with changing the order of the words? HaMashiach tachtav mibanav, or Mashiach mibanav tachtav. Number two, why does Rashi over here elaborate on the meaning of kalil taktar? Why does Rashi not rely like he does earlier that we know what kalil means? And why does Rashi in the next Rashi explain what kalil means? That kula shava, everything equally goes up to Shamayim, to Gavoya. Now we're going to explain all of this. The shaila in pasuk was Rashi bavorant is what's bothering Rashi? What's Rashi addressing? There's shini alashon in the psukim that the fact that there's a different set of words in the two psukim. In Meshten pasuk was that's minchas kain Mashiach. In the first pasuk we're talking about the kain gadol's mincha state kalil taktar, that it'll be fully burned. Taktar melashon ketoides. In zweiten pasuk, in the second pasuk was that's about the mincha of a kain state kalil tiyeh. It shall be kalil. It shall be completely burned, without the word taktar. So Rashi is bothered. Why is there a change in the wording? From them shini the psukim is Rashi medayik, and therefore Rashi learns from this change that there's two different approaches to kalil. When das is mudigus mavur and the Redichas Lashon Rashi, which is highlighted and emphasized and explained in the long-windedness of Rashi. Kalil taktar Rashi mefarish einik metzas liyeshira nachalin elakulu kalil. By saying it so elaborately, Rashi is making very clear what his intent is. As Kadul Taktar made need to shaylos on the menu from Kmitza. The Kadul Taktar does not exclude Kmitza, which means when we learned the Sikha, when we went into this in the previous Sif, what did we understand? That ein nikmetzes, it doesn't have a Kmitza. And then the rest of it would be eaten. So the Rebbe explains what's Rashi saying einik metzes. He's not saying that there's no kmitza. Kmitza darf sein. There must be kmitza. Says Oberazak mitzvahs ein shirei nachalon. Usually, what does kmitza mean? You take off a handful and the rest is eaten. This Rashi says ein nikmetzes liyoshirei nachalon. It's not the kind of kmitza that leaves the leftovers to be eaten. Rather, also the shirayim are burned on the mizbeach. As the Rebbe quotes from another halacha, the handful is burned for itself, and then the shirayim, the leftovers, are burned for themselves. Und das ist der Pirus von kalil taktar, and this is the meaning of the words kalil taktar, as outside their kaimet, side the shirayim, both a handful, and the rest of it, are burned on the mizbeach. So it's a different way to understand Rashi, and it makes it very clear. Kalil taktar means that everything gets burned, but not in a way that everything is equal. In a way that you take a kaimitz, like most other minchas, you take a kaimitz and you burn the kaimitz, and then you take the shirayim and you burn it as well. The Tzeiter kalil, the second kalil, which says kalil tiyeh, was state by kol minchas kayin, is pirushay kulei shaval agavay, everything is equal. In der mincha is the talking for another tailen if I came it's enough shirayim. In this mincha we don't subdivide it into the handful and the rest. The entire thing is burned equally to Hashem. Since there's absolutely no kmitza at all. The word tiyeh, as he bleibt kalil behava yasa, it remains in its original form. It is burned, tiyeh, it is burned in its original form, meaning to say before a Kayim mitzvah was taken. So the Rashi is explaining to us very, very strong and very important. Without this Rashi, we would never understand what the pasuk is saying. Here it says Kalil Taktar, here it says Kalil Tiyah. It's a huge difference. In Kalil Taktar means you take a kmitza first. In Kalil Tiyah, there's no kmitza. In both cases, it's Kalil, it's burnt on the Mizbeach. But in the case of the Minchas Kayin Gadol, both the kmitza and the shirayim are burned separately. In the case of the Minchas Kayin, Kalil Tiyah, the whole thing is burned equally together. In Sivav, the Rebbe is going to explain why. My time from the Mechiluk, why are we differentiating between the two? Why is Hashem doing that? Why would there be a difference? But now, based on what we explained in Siv Beis, about the fact that this is, it could be a carbon sibur, it could be a carbon yachid, now we understand the difference very, very simply, very, very beautifully. Rashi nimmt an, bepsudis mikra, the Chavite Ken Gadol was kommen tamid b'chol yom, seine nit in a gather von a carbon, was der Ken Gadol bringt als yachid. Unlike the Rambam, which we said that the Rambam is going l'shitas Rabbi Yehuda, that the Minchas Chavitin was a carbon yachid, Rashi followed Shutishal Mikra that the Chavite Kohen Gadol are not, since they're brought tamid on a regular, consistent basis. Therefore, Rashi learns that they are not something that are coming from the Kohen Gadol as an individual in Zelben Sug via Minchas Kohen Stam. And that would compare it to the Minchas Kohen, which was a carbon yachid, just for the fact, the extra detail that this is being connected to the fact that he's a Kohen Gadol. Nor that's not the case. We're not saying that this is a Minchas Yachid similar to the Minchas Kohen. Nor das is a carbon was bringt als Shliach von Klal Yisrael. This is a carbon that the Kohen Gadol is bringing as a representative of Klal Yisrael. Al derech vid der carbon tamid, ein carbon sibur, similar to a carbon to a carbon tamid, and therefore it has the definition or the characteristics of a carbon sibur. Al pize is move on. For was Rashi learned as Chavite Ken Gadol lefan kmitza. That's why he holds it has to have kmitza. But das is nit a geder von a Minchas Kohen. It's not following, it's not in the same category as a Minchas Kohen, which does not need kmitza. It is like a Minchas Tzibur, when Mele Darfus having kmitza, therefore it needs kmitza. As Zevi Allah andere menachas as being gebracht auf Mizbeach, like all the other menachas that are being brought in the Mizbeach, that they do need kmitza. Rabbi does lepeil. But since in the end it's being brought by the Kohen Gadol specifically, so it has some similarity and some comparison to the Minchas Kohen, as eight shirah and achalin, that we're not going to eat the shirayim. We can't eat the rest of it, so the shirayim is also burned. But it has to have a kmitza, because it's a carbon sibur. That's the difference. By the Minchas Kohen, it doesn't need kmitza, because it's a carbon yachid. Carbon yachid doesn't need kmitza. And therefore, kula shavala gavoya, the whole thing is burned equally on the Mizbeach. Whereas the Minchas Kohen Gadol, the Chavite Kohen Gadol, it has the definition of a carbon sibur, and therefore it needs kmitza. But nevertheless, it's burned entire. But also the shirayim is burned because of its similarity to a Minchas Kohen as well. And this will also explain now. So now we understand what Rashi is doing. In the Kadil Taktar, it's not that he thinks we don't know what Kadil means. He's explaining to us what it means by the Minchas Kohen Gadol, that there has to be a kmitza, and then shireh are not nechal, and they're not, the remainder is not eaten. And in Kadil Tiyah, he says Kula Shaval Agavei is explaining that over here there is no kmitza, and everything is burned on the Mizbeach. Now we got to go back to the first question. The question, what is Rashi telling us when he says HaMashiach Tachtov Mibanov, and explains that it means HaMashiach Mibanov Tachtov? My time is Rashi Echmaktem Miperusha V'Tchilas HaKasuv V'Hakoyin HaMashiach Tachtov Mibanov und is Mifshana Mefarish HaMashiach Mibanov Tachtov. Rashi changes the order. Let's follow this very, 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 because it's actually very beautiful. The Mitzvah Rashi Sheilus on him Sudish Onik and the Pirish Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi is coming to negate the approach of Rabbi Yehuda. Lefi Pirish Rabbi Yehuda kumtois. As the word mibanov and mele ich the word tachtov is not kosher to the word Mashiach nor to yasa. It's best if you're looking inside of a chumash, but you have the pasuk says va'hakoyin Mashiach tachtov mibanov yasa oisa. The way Rashi learns it, va'hakoyin Mashiach break, he passed away, tachtov mibanov yasa oisa. His son in his place is going to do it. Und der Pirush in pasuk is kenal, and what does it mean? That if the Kohen Mashiach passed away, he's tachtov mibanov yasai, so one of his children will do it instead of him. That if Bana bringing the carbon mincha tachtov, his children have to bring the carbon mincha in his place. If you're going to say, Rashi can't learn like that because it's not Pshuta Shal Mikra. The Rebbe answers that in the brackets. Even though this is mamish not the simple meaning, you're adding in the word Akein Mashiach if he died. Nevertheless, but still in this case we might have thought to say, as the mitvas the pasuk doctor say that anstat mi banav tachtav tachtav mi banav, since the pasuk changes the order, the proper way to have said it would have been the Akein Mashiach mi banav tachtav, and instead it says tachtav mi banav. Is the pasuk menam is nachadin? I would think maybe the pasuk is changing the order of how you normally would speak in order to allude to a new din. Neisav and Pirush Apasha from pasuk at the nach kumendik Akein Mashiach tafreng and chavite ken gadol. In addition to the simple meaning of the pasuk that the next kohen, the successor, the succeeding kohen, would bring the chavite ken gadol once he is appointed. Maybe Rashi is being maybe the pasuk is being menam is another din. As ken gadol shemes bringing banav zayin karbi v'das Rabbi Yehuda. That the Kohen Gadol had passed away, his sons bring it as of the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So even though it's not Pshuta Shal Mikra, but still we would struggle with the words being in the wrong order, so to speak, and then we would say maybe the pasuk is telling us that it's meant to be understood according to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda that the Yarshim bring it. This is why Rashi changes the order of the words. Is Rashi Sheilud and Pirush Pshuta Shal Mikra? Rashi negates this Pirush und lernt as es kilo es volt lechatchile gestanden in pasuk HaMashiach mibanav tachtav. When it's nicht mafsik zwischen Mashiach and mibanav, der Kohen HaMashiach was mibanav tachtav. Look again at the words. Na tachtav mibanav yasa oisa. But va Kohen HaMashiach tachtav mibanav. Or the Rashi changes the order of Kohen HaMashiach mibanav tachtav. That it's talking about the Kohen that becomes a Kohen Gadol, the actual successor of the Kohen Gadol. Of a nidban of stam, not the regular children that are not Kohanim Gdolim, that are just here in the interim period. But Rashi nemt on kanal as Chavite Kohen Gadol coming out kapara of Klal Yisrael, because Rashi holds that the Chavite Kohen Gadol are coming as a kapara for Klal Yisrael. When the Kohen Gadol brings out Shliach from Klal Yisrael, and the Kohen Gadol is bringing them as a representative of the Yidden. So therefore, the it doesn't make sense that his children should bring it. Because they're not representing Klal Yisrael, they're not a new Kohen, they're just his children. So that explains why Rashi changes the order. Rashi is trying to negate the Pirush of Rabbi Yehuda and say that this pasuk is talking only about the next Kohen Gadol, not about the children of the Kohen Gadol in the interim period, because Rashi holds, like Reb Shimon, that this is a carbon sibur, and it's coming for the purpose of Klal Yisrael, and therefore, the only child of the previous Kohen Gadol that would bring it is only if he is a Kohen HaMashiach midbanav tachtav. Only if it's a Kohen that was anointed, that became a new Kohen Gadol. Otherwise, it was going to come Mishal Tzibur. Alpia now the Rebbe is going to continue with this Lishitase. Because what really happened is that Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda each brought a pasuk. Reb Shimon brought a pasuk, Chukas Olam, Mishal Olam, and Rabbi Yehuda brought a pasuk, Akein HaMashiach. So just now, as we learned the Rashi, we realize that according to Reb Shimon, all you have to do is learn the pasuk kipshutai and understand it in Pshuta Shal Mikra by changing the order of the words. And there's no indication in this pasuk about Banav Stam, about the children that aren't Kohanim Gedolim. So therefore, if you're going to say, what's Reb Shimon going to do with the pasuk Akein HaMashiach? He says very simple. It's talking about the next Kohen Gadol. The question is, what happens with the pasuk Chukas Olam according to Rabbi Yehuda? So the Rebbe is going to explain this to us, and we're going to see a continuation in this Lishitase, in the two different approaches, that of Rabbi Yehuda versus that of Rabbi Shimon. Al pi anal, the chiluk between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is aplukta in the Megillah from Minchas Chavitin. So now that we realize, based on the way we explained it, and then how we use that explanation to understand the Rambam, how we use that explanation to understand the Rashi, which and that confirms to us that this is the source of the machlekes. How do you define Minchas Chavitin? When the Kohen Gadol brings the Mincha, even if the Kohen Gadol himself is the one who's bringing it. Yes, we could explain another difference. And in order to explain this difference, let's focus on this following thing. The Gemara fragt, Rabbi Yehuda, Hai Chak Olam Ha'avidle. What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the pasuk Chak Olam? Chak Olam LaHashem. Chak Olam LaHashem, Kadol Takter. What does he do with that? If he holds that it's not coming Mishal Olam, how does he teach it? So the Gemara answers, Chukal Olam Tei. The answer that he learns from this, that this is an eternal statute. Is Teisus Masber. Teisus explains that Aaron has to bring a daily chavitin. Ubanav b'shash nasu kohanim gedolim. His children, when they become kohanim gedolim, Even though they already were inducted into being a regular kohen, when they become a kohen gadol, they would again bring a minchas chavitin. But I would think that after Aaron, there's no such thing as a daily chavitin. The only time the next kohen gadol brings a chavitin is on the day that he becomes a kohen gadol. And the chiddush of the pasuk would be that even though he already brought it once when he became a kohen hedyot, now that he became a kohen gadol, he brings it again. He brings another one. But I wouldn't know necessarily that this is a daily thing beyond Aaron's times. Therefore, we have to have a limud chak olam, that this continues every single day, even after Aaron. And Taisus concludes that Reb Shimon does not hold of this svara. What are they arguing about? Are they arguing whether we would know that you have to bring the carbon chavitin, the minchas chavitin, every single day, or that you need a special limud for it? What is Tesa saying? It is moving up here now. But now that we understand that we're coming from a perspective of is it a carbon sibur, is it a carbon yachid, now we understand very well what's going on. The avedis atmidis and niktos and verbunden mit sibur. The consistent or constant avodas in the Mishkan belong to the community. The concept of tzibur, of the community, is a constant and eternal idea or existence. As the din is that there's no such thing that the tzibur passed away. The tzibur always carries on. The das Reb Shimon as chavite kein gadol, carbon sibur. So according to Reb Shimon, the chavite kein gadol go into the category of a communal sacrifice. We don't need any special. Reb Shimon, last day high svara is saying Reb Shimon says it's a carbon sibur. Obviously, it's ledoidus. Obviously, it's forever. That's a bedayim from carbon tamas. So therefore, chak olam is now extra, and from this he learns that it's mishal tzibur. Chak olam means that it comes mishal olam. That's the carbon yachid. Their carbon fun kain gadol atzme. According to the who holds that it's considered a personal carbon. Which by carbon yachid gefind men it as al kumen tamid b'chol yom, which we don't find by a carbon yachid that it has to be done on a daily basis. The Rebbe davon haben al libud that the mitzvah zakrav from them carbon yachid is chul kulayim tehei. So b'chol yom yakiven that we need a special limud that it should be daily. The fact that the Torah says that it should be done every day, I might have thought that it's only in Aaron's times. But how do I know after that? So therefore the pasuk says chak olam. That even after Aaron it's a daily, but it's a chiddush only according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds as a carbon yachid. Therefore, you need a special limud to teach me that it would be a daily thing. Oh, now we're going to continue on this theme, on this concept of what does it mean that it's constant? What does it mean that I have to bring it every day? And the Rabbi is going to bring two approaches. Either you could say that it's one continuous chiyuv. That has to be fulfilled every single day, but it's all part of one overarching obligation. And then there's another way of looking at it, that every single day it's its own mitzvah. Meaning to say, this explanation that he gave in Siv Zayin, that according to Reb Shimon, you don't need a special limit for it, and according to Reb Yehuda, you do need a special limit for it. It's not just do I need to know it. No, it says from the carbon. It also changes how you define the consistency or the constancy, if that's a word, of this carbon. Yes, leimar. As the chiyuvim tmidim of atzibor is nitan anefim from as jeder tag is the noch anaya chiyuv. Other tmidim, other constant obligations. It's not that every day is a brand new obligation. It's one continuous obligation. As if the tzibur atzma is ein mitzias, nimshachas v'tmidus. Just like we look at the community, at the people, as if it's one continuous, consistent existence. So too the karbanos that they bring every single day, it's all part of one continuous obligation. So now let's apply this to the chavite ken gadol. We have carbon sibur. If you're following the approach of Reb Shimon, that this is like a communal sacrifice. Is the fact that the Torah says it has to be done constantly, tamid, is ein chiyuv tmidi. It's one continuous, constant obligation. Which applies becomes applicable on the day that he is anointed and inducted to the service of Makriv Zayin B'chol Yom V'Yom, so that way he should not, from that point on, bring it every single day. Like the carbon tamid that starts whenever the Beis Hamikdash opens, and then it continues every single day. That's the approach of Reb Shimon. You don't need a limit b'yuchad because it's obvious, because it's a carbon tzibur, and therefore it follows the same character trait as a carbon tzibur, that it is one continuous obligation. But if you're going to learn that it's a carbon yachid, we don't have the same concept of consistency by a yachid. By a tzibur, you say a tzibur never ends. But by a yachid, you don't say that. Darfen zagin as the chiyuv hakrava from mincha tamid meint as bechol yom v'yom is da if in ken gadol a bezunder nay chiyuv l'hakir v'chavitim. You must say that according to the approach of Rabbi Yehuda, this is a carbon yachid. Every day is a brand new chiyuv, and it's a very beautiful differentiation. Now you're saying something else. You're taking this a whole nother step. Not only are you saying, in other words, both Rabbi Yehuda and Shimon agree that the chavitim continues every single day. But even when you go back before the Kohen Gadol passed away, and the Kohen Gadol is bringing his chavitim every single day, do you say that it's all one chiyuv, or do you say that every single day is its own chiyuv? Al pizeh, vet euch sein verstandig die drasha sateras kena von pasik ze carbon aron beyoim himashach oisei mincha tamid. In these psukim, it says like this: this is the carbon of Aaron on the day that he was anointed, a mincha for tamid constantly or consistently. V'zel Shayne says the Torah is as follows: Mi yoim shenimshach. Maybe Asiris Efa Adelim, from the day he is anointed, he brings a tenth of an Efa every single day. Maybe Asiris Efa Mafsik. Maybe I would think that on the day that you're anointed, and that's it. Talmud Lema Mincha Tamid. Therefore it says that it has to be constant. So what does it mean? On the day of his anointing, if he brings it every single day. Answer the Teres Kohanim, maybe Asir Seifa Adaylam, on the day of his anointing, he brings an Asir Seifa forever. So, seemingly, it's very cryptic. Is the Cherin in the move on? First, after the Teres Kohanim, it's very to be Moshe Chayse learn as the Moshe Chayse maybe Adaylam. What is the Teres Kohanim saying? That on the day of his anointing, he brings it forever. As es volgestanden blaze mincha tamid, wo man echt gewusst, dass man darf ständig bringen dem carbon b'yem, wenn is given a kein God leim Moshe Chayse. If it said just the words mincha tamid and not b'yem Moshe Chayse, I would know tamid means every day. So what is the yem Moshe Chayse? When would he start? Obviously from his first day. So what is the yem Moshe Chayse telling us, and how is the Teres Kohanim answering its question? However, according to what we said until now, you could say, as the Teres Kohanim tutuf, as yeder tag ad elam heisa yem Moshe Chayse. Then the Teres Kohanim is telling us that every single day is considered the day of his anointing. The yem Moshe Chayse atzmi is nimshach. The Teres Kohanim is telling us, b'yom Moshe Chayse, maybe as ad elam, that yom Moshe Chayse continues into every day. But das geht as baran again from mincha tamid, and that explains what does it mean mincha tamid. As it medius versteht in them, was jeder tag is the chiv zu bringen dem carbon mincha, wie das wird gewend the yom Moshe Chayse. That every single day there is an obligation to bring this carbon mincha as if it was the day of his anointing. This is a fascinating way of understanding what's the Teres Kohanim. It doesn't make any sense unless you understand, unless you build from the beginning of the Sikha that the carbon that Rabbi Yehuda holds Misha Yoshim because he holds it's a carbon yachid. If he holds it's a carbon yachid, that means that he holds that Chak Olam needs a special limud, because you wouldn't know to do it every single day. It's a carbon yachid. And if there's a special limud for it, that leads first me to understand that every single day, and because it's a carbon yachid, that every single day is its own chiyuv. And therefore, when he says b'yom Moshe Chayse, maybe Asir Seifa Adaylam, he's telling me that every day is yom Moshe Chayse. Every single day is the day of his anointing. This also has halachic ramifications. According to this understanding, that every single day it's a brand new Yom Moshe Chayse. It's a brand new day of anointing. It's a brand new induction, and therefore it needs another minchas chavitim. Is a get of minchas chinuch. That would mean that the chavite kain gadol every day is as if it's the mincha of induction. Therefore, there's room to say, just like the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to start his term until he brings the minchas chinuch, a mincha that inducts him, that brings him into the aveda. Similarly, it would be every single day. Since every day is Yom Mashiach, say, as they turn al kapanim lechatchila ken aveda eider abreita chavitin them lechatchila, he can't do anything. So now we've gone a step further. Not only are we teaching the Yom Mashiach, say that every day is not its own chiyuv, not just its own chiyuv, it's its own Yom Mashiach, say, but it also has a practical halachic application that in that case the Kohen Gadol has to always do the minchas chavitin first, because otherwise he's not nischanich for that day's avodah. And Siftes, the Rebbe concludes with connecting this with the Chassidische parsha in Likutei Torah. The Bir now in the Gedder von Mincha Tamid that has brought us carbon yachid, following the opinion of carbon yachid, and therefore every single day is its own chiyuv, and therefore every single day is its own Yom Mashiach, say. As the Yom Mashiach says, it's a continuous thing. As b'chol yom v'yom v'ert anayer chiyuv and avos carbon chinuch, and every single day has its own brand new obligation to bring this carbon. Is echmasim mit bir in Likutei Torah. This also fits, is consistent with the beer in the Gourarie, the Chassidische parsha. The Alter Rebbe asks in the Gourarie on the words of Yom Mashiach, the Lechera have the lemar mi Yom Mashiach. The Surah said from the day of his anointing, because it says mincha tamid, from the day of his anointing. It should be mincha tamid, a consistent mincha. Und verefert das ist kedei shal yidei ze yiyah b'chol yom v'yom ad olam gilui b'chinus u'madregas Yom Mashiach. That the Alter Rebbe says in the Likutei Torah that the reason it says be Yom Mashiach to teach us that every single day forever there is the revelation of the level of Yom Mashiach into this world. Now, without the sicha, what does that mean? What does it mean? B'chol yom there's a gilui. Und viert uns, das ist, was steht bei Carbon Ari Mincha Tamid, daheinu ad Eilam, v'afal pikein ubchinas b'Yom Mashiach. That even though it's by Carbon Ari Mincha Tamid, it's also, even though it's happening every single day, it's also b'Yom Mashiach. But das is masim avur leo derech nigla, which fits perfectly with what we explained according to Nigla. As b'chol yom v'yom is dadar Yom Mashiach. That every single day is Yom Mashiach. Every single day is the day of anointing. So now we understand what the Alter Rebbe is saying. Look at the Torah. Every day is the gilui of Yom Mashiach, because Al Pi Nigla every day is Yom Mashiach. Because otherwise, why would it be carbon tamid? Why would you bring one every single day if it's just a carbon yachid? And therefore, we now see how the two opinions of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, each one has their own pasuk. It fits with the opinion of carbon sibur versus carbon yachid. It fits with the Rambam who goes the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda avur kaparasi that it's for the Kohen Gadol. It fits. Rashi fits in. The Rashi goes according to Pshuti Shal Mikra that it's a carbon sibur. It fits in with the Pshat of Chukah Leilam Tei that according to Rabbi Shimon you don't need a new limit because it's a carbon sibur, whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda you need a new limit because it's a carbon yachid. It fits to also explain the fact that there's two opinions, there are two ways to look at the tamid, if it's one long continuous chiyuv or if it's a daily chiyuv in every single day, which fits into the bir and teres kenu of Yom Mashiach, which adds in nafmin la halacha that every single day there's a isur lechatchila for the Kohen Gadol to do any work until he brings his chavitin, and it also fits with the Chassidische parsha, where also there it says that every single day is a gilui of Yom Himashach Oisei.